So everyone, today, thank you guys again for joining us to learn more about what we're talking about today. The topic of today's webinar is going to be how to reduce the risk and complexities of cross-border selling. So my name is Nicholas. I'm a part of the sales team here at Zonos. I've had the pleasure of working with hundreds of merchants that sell to in the international market. And I've been able to hear a bunch of their stories and help them work through some issues. We also have Travis Robinson with us. Travis, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Travis Robinson. I am the Chief Strategy Officer here at Zonos. I've been at Zonos for over 8 years, and yeah, love talking cross-border and helping solve the many complexities that come with cross-border selling.
Yeah, and there can be many. So, and for anyone, if you guys have ever sold anything to a cross-border market, then you probably understand that there can be a lot of complexities involved. Everything from calculating the correct amount of duties and taxes to managing and even understanding all the different foreign tax schemes out there. So today in the webinar, we are going to talk about some of the complexities that go along with cross-border selling. We're going to talk about the risk, some of the costs that our merchants see. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Zonos' Landed Cost Guarantee service. We're going to talk about how it came into existence, what it can do for you, and some of the stories that we've heard from our customers. We will also be doing a Q&A throughout this as well. So if you guys have questions, feel free to submit those questions in the Q&A section, and we'll try to answer those live. And if we have some time at the end, we'll go back and make sure we get to some of those and review with you guys as well. So Travis, since you've been with the company so long, can you tell us some of your experiences that you've had with cross-border and some of the complexities you've seen?
Yeah, you make it sound like I'm really, really old, Nick, by the way, but yes, I have been here for a while. So, yeah, like you mentioned, right? I mean, cross-border shipping outside of your domestic country can be significantly more challenging than, shipping a package from state to state. And so, let's just assume that you're already providing, a better checkout experience and showing a full landed cost to your customer, and there's no surprises of duties and taxes and those fees that come along with that. But if we take that next step and with just shipping DDP, duties and taxes already prepaid, if you'll go to this next slide, Nick, the reconciliation process can be a challenge, to say the least. So of course, it's not just, duties and tax charges that are on the invoice. You've got things like, in this instance, you've got warehousing fees, you've got a couple of different revalidation fees, brokerage charges. And this can change by country, it can change by product. And so the time and effort to make sure and, being able to reconcile these. Now, the nice thing is Zonos works really hard to include these fees in a landed cost in those duty and tax calculations. So it's a complete landed cost. So, you as a merchant aren't on the hook for those, but still having to reconcile those can be very, very time consuming.
Yeah, that's what I've heard from a lot of our customers, is that it can get very time consuming and complex. And Travis, I know that you mentioned that this can change country to country. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the different VAT schemes out there and what may be coming up in the future?
For sure. So, I mean, the ideal state, of course, would be, more free trade, and, that benefits, the majority of the people, whether that's the export or import country, but that's a totally different webinar. So we saw Australia was really the first ones to kind of change the way that this had always been. So as cross-border trade continues to get bigger and bigger and more opportunities out there for it, these governments were seeing like, hey, we need to make sure and try to collect the tax and do things to collect on these imports that are coming in. So Australia was the first one to change this, where they said, look, it's actually, we're going to take that onus off the receiving party or the end customer. And depending on the volumes and thresholds and the amount that you're shipping into, we're going to put that responsibility on the merchants or those that are selling. And, from that, we saw New Zealand come online with this. We saw Norway, and then we had Brexit, and then the EU. and we've got Singapore coming online. So having to manage all these different thresholds, how they charge, when they charge, what they charge, it's a mess and just getting messier, right? And so we're going to see more and more countries moving towards this. Again, them wanting to receive that revenue from these packages that are coming in. And so just staying on top of this can be a full-time job in and of itself.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's an ever-changing landscape, right? Where trying to keep up with everything that's changing in the international market, it is a full-time job. And with all your experience in doing this, Travis, what are some of the risks and costs to the merchants they can face during this?
Yeah, obviously you can just roll the dice, right? And try to fly under the radar, and that can work and for a while, but the problem is you just never know is when that could come back to bite you. And that can be fines and back payments, upwards of, hundreds or thousands of dollars, depending on the amount of packages that are coming through. So if we go to this next slide, we'll kind of give a breakdown of what some of those costs can be on just a single country. So into the EU, for example, you're required to have a fiscal representative, and that can cost upwards of $7,500 a year. So on top of that, there is a per package fee. To go scroll through this, that's usually around $1 per package. And then you've got a monthly submittal charge, that's $25. And then just looking at the labor costs to manage this, and with reconciliation, reporting, and remittance, and this is a very conservative number. I mean, you could be around $300 a month just for the time spent in doing that. So looking at just, again, this is the EU, and averaging just about 100 or so packages a month, you could be around over $1,000 a month just for the EU. So making sure that that compliance piece can be very, very expensive.
Yeah, it definitely can be. And with a lot of the merchants that I've spoken with, the labor cost on that can be significantly higher, especially depending on the volume of orders that you have going to these countries. It can be quite the lift. Travis, not to poke some more fun at your age at all, but I know you were kind of around during the inception of our landed cost guarantee product. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience and how that came into existence?
Yeah, for sure. So initially, like I talked previously on just the reconciliation piece, like we had merchants that would reach out just looking for like help and direction, like what do these mean? What are these charges? How do I reconcile this? And so, before the landed cost guarantee was, before that was really a thing, we had a few merchants that we just said, look, why don't you bill those duties and taxes to Zonos when you create that label, just the duties and taxes, and we'll take that on ourselves. And so we started that a few years ago. But then as we saw these tax changes with the tax regimes in different countries doing this, it became more and more apparent that it was creating a ton of friction for our merchants. And I mean, we had a lot of cases where they were saying, look, let's just shut off the UK, shut off the EU. I just don't have the time or resources, and it's just not worth worrying about that right now. And so in order to reduce that friction, that's really when we said, look, there's a real benefit for our customers to be able to offer this landed cost guarantee. So that's really where it started, is saying there was a need there. There was a ton of problems with just making sure that, merchants wanted to stay compliant. They wanted to make sure they were doing what they needed to do and charging what they needed to charge. But just the time and resources to do that was too much. So that's really when LCG came into existence and has now become one of our fastest growing services to date.
Yeah, another thing that I've heard with talking to our customers is about the compliance side of things, is that this gives them the confidence to really push international business. Sometimes merchants are a little bit afraid to really go all in on international because they're afraid of the compliance piece. And by having the service, it takes all of that off your plate and just lets you do what you do best.
Yeah, For sure, Nick. And I think you maybe can go through some of, what Zonos is going to do to help reduce those risks and improve that experience for the merchant.
Yeah, of course. So some of the things that landed cost guarantee can do for you and some of the things that it will take off your plate is the first thing is that it guarantees the accuracy of your landed cost calculation. And on average, Zonos is really good at calculating the total landed cost into most countries. But no matter how good we are, there can be some variances, specifically when it comes to currency conversion. So from the time that an order is placed to when it actually hits the customs agent, currency can change. And that can cause some variations in that duty and tax line. With Zonos' landed cost guarantee, we guarantee down to the penny that what we tell you to charge at checkout is exactly what you will pay in your duty and tax bill. The next thing that it will do is it will manage all non-resident taxation schemes. And really, it's just make sure that you are compliant into every single country that you're shipping into. For the specific countries that Travis mentioned earlier, like the UK and the EU, Zonos actually has UK VAT ID numbers and IOSS numbers that you can use to process your shipments into those countries. So you don't need to take the time to register for those or to pay that $7,500 fee to have representation in the EU. You can just leverage Zonos's account numbers. And for the other countries like Australia, Norway, New Zealand, they all have thresholds. So there are thresholds on the amount of volume that you ship into the country before the taxation schemes apply to your business. And Zonos will be able to track your sales into those countries. And when you do get close to those thresholds or when you're trending to hit those, we can help with the registration process and walk you through that. And then ultimately remit those taxes on your behalf. That can be on a quarterly or a monthly basis to the carrier or to the foreign government that it may be going to. Zonos takes all of that off your plate and remits those, and you receive a single bill from Zonos for exactly what you were told to charge at checkout. So really, that takes care of most of the complexities along with cross-border shipping.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Nick, do you have an experience or a story of a customer that's utilized this?
Yeah. So there was a customer who, during the COVID-19 pandemic, saw a dramatic increase in the demand for their product on an international level. They didn't really want to waste any time or let this kind of new demand go to waste. So they just jumped feet first and they hired some new staff to make sure that they can manage some of the orders coming in. But as that volume increased, so did the complexities. And eventually they reached out to Zonos for some help. And what we heard from them was that it was almost unmanageable. It was complex. They didn't know what they were doing. And they felt like with their 15,000 products that they might not be compliant into certain countries. So what we were able to do for them was set them up with a couple pieces of software and manage their tax remittance through Zonos's landed cost guarantee. And from that, the customer was able to really focus on what they do best, and that's just selling their product. And as a result, they were able to increase their international GMV by 47%. And I think they were actually able to add 21 new countries that they ship their product to. And that's pretty cool. And my biggest takeaway from working with that customer was that as your international volume increases, so do the complexities. And really, if you don't have a plan in place to take care of that, then it can put you kind of behind the plate. And ultimately, that can limit the growth into those countries.
Yeah, for sure. That's an awesome story. Yeah, you're exactly right. Like it's not getting easier, unfortunately. But in order to take advantage of the market that's out there, like, you need to go into those markets, and having a solution like Zonos can make that a lot easier for sure.
Yeah. And the last thing I kind of want to say on that, Travis, is that, we are only a couple months away from peak season. And with peak season, we all know that the demand for our products are going to increase. And if you're selling to an international market, that demand will increase as well. So now could be a good time to get something in place to make sure that you are prepared for any of those increased volumes coming in.
Awesome.
And for any of you that want more information on Zonos' landed cost guarantee, or if you'd like just to chat to me or Travis about any of this stuff, you always can reach out to us at questions@zonos.com. So feel free to submit any requests through there. And also, you will be receiving, if you'd registered for this webinar, you will be receiving an email within 48 hours that will have a link on there as well, where you can send us some information and book an appointment with us as well.
Awesome. I think we've got a little bit of time for a few questions.
I got one here, Travis.
Okay.
So it asked, are there any requirements to be eligible for a landed cost guarantee?
There are a couple requirements, and we're working hard to remove as many of those, requirements or, things that make someone eligible for LCG or landed cost guarantee. But really, you need to be able to bill third party. So billing just duties and taxes back to Zonos so that we're the responsible party for those duties and taxes. And the other thing is just labeling and making sure that shipment label is correct. And again, billing those duties and taxes back to Zonos. So it's all the major carriers. I mean, it's capable. And the nice thing is the Zonos dashboard manages and handles all of that. So you can just create the label and everything gets billed like it should and makes that process really easy.
Yeah. And how hard is that for them to get set up with that?
The setup's really quick. If we check those couple of boxes that are needed, it's really just a flip of the switch and we can have you up and running with LCG like within a few minutes, really. So that part's even easier.
Wonderful.
It looks like we've got a couple, one question. So do shipping labels need to be processed through Zonos, or can we continue to use ShipStation? So again, right now there's limitations with ShipStation not being able to bill third party. We are, like I mentioned, working on some alternative methods to make that so that those type of bottlenecks aren't a problem and we can work around those. So we're actively working through some of those, but really it depends on the carrier and a few other factors. And the best thing to do is just talk to a support rep and see what we can do to help get that turned on.
Excellent. Let's see. I see a question here, Travis. Let's see. So if you can answer this one, Travis. So I'm new to cross-border. Can you talk more about the overall flow as it relates to reconciliation and where exactly the friction occurs for merchants with the respective different parties involved in fulfillment?
So I think if I'm understanding the question, so in the reconciliation, or at least the piece that I was referring to earlier, is when you ship that package DDP, meaning duties and taxes are prepaid. So those are going to get billed back to you, the merchant, so that there's no surprises, right? Because that's the issue when you don't do that, is that package gets shipped cross-border and your customer gets surprised because they owe another, 20, 30, 40, whatever it might be at the doorstep, right? That they weren't aware of. So showing and then shipping that package DDP eliminates that and makes that a better experience. But the reconciliation process in regards to that DDP, similar to what someone might be trying to do with a shipping invoice, right? Like there's other expenses and other charges on the shipping. It's like that, only usually about 10 times worse, because there's different charges and fees, and those come in a lot later typically than what the shipping invoice can be. So you've got a longer delay for the reconciliation, and then just trying to get that, figuring out what those details and what those line items are and how they relate back to the amount that was collected. That's where that challenge lies.
Great. Well, Travis, we're kind of pushing time here. So I think that's kind of it for questions. If you didn't get your question answered on the webinar today, then we will be reaching out to you via email with an answer to your question. So don't feel bad if we didn't answer you. We'll make sure we get back to you on that for sure. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We're going to jump off. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Bye for now, guys.